And we're keeping our eye on the Hill. Joining us now live is attorney and conservative activist Keith Gross. Keith, thank you for joining us. Before we get into any of the confirmation hearings, I want to get your take on what we heard from Senator Mitch McConnell today announcing he's not running for re-election. Now, we're already seeing some contenders coming out in Kentucky. We're seeing former State Attorney General Daniel Cameron. He announced his candidacy already. Republican Congressman Andy Barr is interested too. How do you see that race going about in Kentucky?
I think the people of Kentucky are likely relieved that they will be able to replace a longtime incumbent. I think the general idea of many Americans is that we shouldn't be ruled by the same people year after year. That's why we should be replacing incumbents. And someone like Mitch McConnell should have retired a long time ago. Especially in recent years, what we've seen from Mitch McConnell and many of the other so-called uniparty Republicans has been a departure from the ideas of small government and a willingness to just spend unlimited amounts of money and run up our national debt. So I, for one, will be glad to see a change there.
It's going to be an interesting race for sure. Let's talk about Kash Patel now. We're still waiting on the outcome of that full Senate floor vote, rather. But let's talk about during his confirmation hearing. He had some interesting points to make, mostly in support of Trump's policies, but he did mention that he doesn't support the commutation of sentences for violent January 6th participants. What's your take on that?
Well, my take on that is it's the president's prerogative. The idea that the president is the head of the executive branch is well outlined in our Constitution. And most of the objections that I'm hearing from the Democrat side with respect to the confirmation of Kash Patel is that they're very concerned that he will be loyal to Trump. Well, that's exactly what he's supposed to do. Every president deserves to have a staff that will be loyal to him and will execute the mission, within the boundaries of our constitutional government. But the Democrats are objecting, I think, because they're afraid their corruption is going to be uncovered. And they're afraid that they will be held accountable for their weaponization of government over these last 4 years.
And so what do you think the first action Patel is going to take in office if he indeed is confirmed?
If I were in his shoes, the first thing I would do is a review of staff, because there are a lot of people on the staff there who have been doing the bidding of the Biden administration for the last 4 years, selectively targeting conservatives for increased levels of law enforcement, surveillance, and prosecution. It's time to clean house.
So are you expecting more potential staff cuts to come once he's in office?
Absolutely. That is what we should expect. We should see a reformation. We should see rooting out corruption, rooting out people who have a partisan tilt to the way they enforce the laws. Our Constitution guarantees equal protection under the law. And that's not what we've seen for the last 4 years. We saw people who peacefully walked across on the Capitol steps on January 6th, prosecuted and jailed for years. And at the same time, we saw people burning down cities for the BLM movement go unprosecuted. We've seen liberals across the cities in the United States releasing criminals, violent criminals often, with no consequences or no bail. I think it's time for us to start taking law and order seriously and enforcing laws fairly.
And so with all of these sweeping downsizing efforts from the Trump administration we're seeing for all the other departments, how heavily do you expect the FBI to be hit with this? And what do you say about those criticisms that we're hearing that cutting down on the FBI will threaten national security?
I don't believe that cutting down on the FBI would threaten national security. I think we should have a lot smaller federal government than we currently have. Look, the United States is $37 trillion in debt already. We can't afford this much federal government, and we don't need this much federal government. With respect to law enforcement, we should have some federal law enforcement that focuses on national security priorities and other things that are best served at the national level. But 90% of the mission accomplished by federal law enforcement could be and should be accomplished at the local and state level.
And so with the amount of debate that we're seeing against Kash Patel during his whole confirmation process, could we expect further pushback that slows his goals down once he's confirmed, or if he's confirmed?
We should absolutely expect that there will be ongoing resistance to anything the Trump administration does. We're seeing it already with a litany of lawsuits being filed, which have no constitutional basis for the most part. Our Constitution gives the full power of the executive branch to the president himself. And we've got judges that are trying to substitute their judgment for the president and override the president's Article 2 broad authorities to govern his own branch. I have no doubt that within the FBI, there will be people who try to get in the way of Kash Patel. But this time is different. This time, what we have is a Trump administration who is backing the idea of full authority for the executive branch vested into the president. And we're going to see a president that backs Kash up when he goes to fire these bad actors.
Now, speaking of reforming all of these government departments, of course, a big one would be the Department of Education. I think it's interesting that we still haven't yet seen that confirmation vote for Linda McMahon just yet.
Yeah, I think we're going to see continuing obstruction to anything that the Democrats don't like. And, that's part of the way our government works. Unfortunately, Democrats can't see the reality and the truth, which is that the Department of Education spends hundreds of billions of dollars every year. And since the inception of that Department of Education at the federal level, the cost of education per student has gone up dramatically. The quality of education, the test scores, they've gone down. And so the American people are not getting a good value. It comes back to the idea of a constitutional government that does a limited number of things at the federal level, with most things being done at the state level. Education is one of those things that should certainly be done at the state and local level, where parents can set priorities for how their children are educated.
Keith, last question for you here. Caroline Leavitt, we just heard her earlier today saying that the president will be holding his first cabinet meeting next Wednesday. Of course, we just mentioned Linda McMahon, not confirmed yet. In total, 4 cabinet positions still unconfirmed. My question for you here, can we expect them all to be confirmed before then? And what are they going to talk about during this meeting, do you think?
I do think we will see them confirmed. We've got a lot of senators who are pushing forward and making sure that the American people's mandate is fulfilled. The American people overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump because we didn't like the way the country was headed. We want a fresh start. We want someone to put America first, and that's what Donald Trump is going to do. I am sure that one of the primary discussions at that cabinet meeting is going to be, how do we cut costs? How do we reduce the size and scope of the federal government? And how do we ensure that every tax dollar we spend is spent putting Americans first?
Keith Gross, attorney and conservative activist, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.